So a few things I want to clarify before I jump into this quote-unquote re-review of the Tomb Raider 4 through 6 trilogy. Number one, there are indeed some quality of life improvements that the game does offer that I was not aware of at the time I did my review. Now, thankfully, I was made aware of it by some of the comments I saw in my last review that were left by some viewers. And if you're one of those people who left the comment for the quality of life improvements that I was clearly missing, and you left it in a friendly, calm manner, I appreciate that because you helped me see something that I did not see when I played the game. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is whether or not the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro trilogy were remakes or remasters. I keep seeing constant debates in the comments telling me that I was wrong, that they are ground up remakes and not remasters. But let me clarify something here. I clearly said ground up remaster in my review. Also, if you Google both the Spyro trilogy and the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, it clearly shows Spyro being labeled as a remake and then the Crash trilogy being labeled as a remaster. So technically, I was right either way because I did say ground up and I did say remaster, and they're both essentially the same in that category for Spyro and Crash. And my main point behind that was I wanted the Tomb Raider trilogy 1 through 3 and the Tomb Raider trilogy 1 through 6 to have the same treatment as the Crash and Spyro trilogy, getting that full ground up, built from scratch visuals and performance of the games. That was the main point that I was making, and you guys clearly took it out of context and didn't understand what I was going for. So hopefully it's clear now and we can stop the pointless debate in the comments section. And I've also seen comments, people saying that these Tomb Raider trilogy collections are meant to preserve the classics, and I understand that from a certain point of view. You can still do a ground up visual redo. I'm gonna call it redo now because you guys can't seem to decide on remake or remaster or argue with me about it. So a ground up redo of the visuals and performance, but still include a OG visuals option like the game currently has by pressing the start button or plus button, whatever console you're on, to switch back and forth between the visuals. So you can still preserve the classics while still giving us a much more improved visual experience. I also seen comments telling me that it's my fault for not knowing or learning the tank controls and my fault using the modern controls. But let me explain something to you. Out of all 6 trilogy games that were re-released and remastered, I only played Angel of Darkness back in the day, but the fact that the game includes modern controls for a specific type of player who wants to use modern controls, that tells me that the game should function properly for both the tank controls and modern controls, and I shouldn't be blamed or criticized for not using tank controls when I have the option not to do that. And the game should function as it should. So if you're someone who likes tank controls and you're good with them, that's fine. That's your playstyle. Someone like me who doesn't want to use tank controls and I'm looking for a bit more of a modern experience, I should not be criticized for wanting that experience. I should be able to share my opinion that the developer could do a bit better with the controls on the modern control scheme to be a bit more smooth and a bit more responsive. And I'll talk about more of the controls in this review in terms of its responsiveness because there are some issues going on. Now, yes, I did kind of rush through my review when I did release it because I was trying to get it out as fast as possible from the time I played the game, but I also have some personal stuff going on, which I'm only human. We all go through things in life. We all have to handle things the best we can. And I don't have a large enough YouTube channel to make a living off of this channel. I still have to make certain sacrifices. I still have to work a full-time job and try to fit in my YouTube work whenever I can. So yes, I did rush through the review, rush through the parts of the games that I played. And that's why I'm doing this re-review, to give the game a second chance and more of a fair chance to do a better review in my opinion. And I think I did make some notes for a much better review, which is going to hopefully be this one here. And hopefully this re-review is going to help you have a better idea of what kind of gamer and reviewer I am, and not something that you can just assume the type of person I am and attack me in the comments when I'm just trying to do the best I can with what I got to help my channel really take off and become a career goal for me in the future. But with all that said, let me jump right into this Tomb Raider 4 through 6 re-review and share more of my thoughts on how I feel about this collection. Now, as stated earlier, there are indeed some quality of life improvements that the game does include, and I wasn't aware because aside from having to go through the menus to look for these shortcuts, the game doesn't really do a good job explaining the shortcuts to you. any tutorial that you would find, from the most part that I felt, were really focused on the tank controls and not so much focused on modern controls. I feel like with a remaster like this, the game should know which control scheme you're using and kind of create a tutorial for that control scheme so you have a better idea of how the game functions. Now, these quality of life improvements do include a quick save and quick load, as well as cycling through your weapons quickly without going through the menus. Now, the problem that I had with this is doing a quick load was a bit uncomfortable and clunky, as on the Nintendo Switch, you have to hold the minus button and press L3 to do a quick load, so it was a bit difficult to do that comfortably. But thankfully, quick saving, which was more important in my opinion, is easier to do by holding the minus button and pressing R3, and then minus button with the face buttons will then change your weapon. Now, the only problem I had with changing my weapons with the shortcut was in Angel of Darkness, as you don't get a visual representation of Laura's weapons switching when you do the shortcuts, whereas you do get that visual representation in the other two games, such as the guns in her holsters changing between one to another, and the shotgun would appear on her back letting you know that it was equipped. Angel of Darkness would not give you that indication, but sometimes switching your weapons in Angel of Darkness, at least for me, would not work, and when I go to press the buttons and then I let go, it would just take me straight to that pause menu, which for some reason Angel of Darkness had a longer wait time to reach that pause menu compared to the other two games in this collection. Now, besides from the really comically bad driving section of the fourth game, I did notice quite a bit of issues when it came to the controls being smooth and responsive, most commonly when it comes to making certain jumps with Laura. Now, I was incorrect in my last review saying that Angel of Darkness was the only game that would keep Laura from falling off a ledge if you hold the walk button, which I was clearly wrong. You can do that for all three games, but when it came to getting a running start and then trying to jump, now don't get confused, I'm not talking about pressing the sprint button to run faster, because doing a jump with that would lead to a dive roll rather than a jump. So I would do a normal running jump, and sometimes Laura would just not jump off the ledge at all, and she would just fall off the ledge. If it was short enough, I just have to climb back up or a quick load. If it was a high enough ledge, she would fall to her death because she would not jump when I'm pressing the jump button. And this would happen if I either press the jump button at the right time, or I press it a few seconds before, or if I'm holding the jump button, just sometimes it would not respond at all, and it was very frustrating. There were also times where I'm holding a certain direction to have Laura jump or climb in that direction, but she would instead jump or climb in a completely different direction, which would then lead to more issues of me falling to my death and having to reload over and over and over again. There's also some delays with combat depending on the weapon you're using. The shotgun in particular takes much time to take out and start shooting compared to her other guns. And when it came to Tomb Raider Revelations, there's a laser scope you can equip to your weapons, and you would then need to use that for certain puzzles. And the problem I had was the game gave me no indication whatsoever on how to use the scope, and as normal games you would press the R3 stick to zoom in, but it would not work for me at all until I held one of the buttons, the L button I believe it was, and press R3, but hold R3 for at least 2 or so seconds, and that will allow Laura to zoom in with the laser to then do what I need her to do. The problem with that was there was a boss fight early on in Revelations that's very easy to defeat because it only really takes 2 shots to kill them, but the delay in the controls and trying to exit that scope very seamlessly was so delayed and so bad that that boss kept killing me over and over and over and over and over and over again. Now, these are some issues that I hear might be phased out with an update, but I really need this update to happen sooner than later, as these controls, with them being unresponsive, have been very frustrating for me to actually make it through the game a bit more simpler than I was hoping it would be. Yes, the games are going to be challenging with their puzzles and the platforming, but these unresponsive controls make it even more challenging, but it's an unnecessary challenge. There's also issues with the camera. When you're climbing certain structures or you're going through certain small spaces, the camera will zoom in too quickly and too close to Laura, and sometimes these camera zoom ins will give you a pleasant view, but sometimes it will just zoom in all the way to where you can't even see Laura anymore, and you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what body pose you're in, which way you're going, and you have to really fight with the right stick with the camera just to get into a bit of a normal view to know what you're doing. Again, hopefully this is something that could be be fixed with an update, but it is something that could have been fixed if they did a full ground up remake slash remastered, whatever you want to call it, whatever the proper term is. I'm going to use both of those terms for this game specifically. Remake or remaster, ground up, those things would have been fixed if they'd done it that way. And again, I don't mean remake in the style of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, where they change certain aspects of the game and certain levels. I mean, just like they did with the Crash trilogy and the Spyro trilogy, make the same games from back in the day, but with much better visuals and performance and controls. Another big problem I had with the camera is there are certain parts of the game, it doesn't happen very often, but certain sections of the levels will then switch to a fixed camera angle temporarily, which would be fine if the controls would respond as they should in those angles as normal with the modern controls. But when you are in these fixed camera sections, it will then throw away your modern control scheme and temporarily have you go into somewhat of a tank control scheme, because you try to run forward as you would normally would with modern controls, but she would then run in a different direction because you're not holding up on the stick as you would with the tank controls. Does that make any sense? Just to wrap that up real quickly, certain parts of the game will put you in a fixed camera angle where it will disregard your modern control scheme and kind of force you to do a quick tank control scheme in that section, and that's really frustrating. Again, I don't want to learn the tank controls because the game did come with modern controls, and I want to use modern controls as a comfort thing. Now, going back to combat real briefly, not only were some aspects of combat unresponsive, but I did mention in my last review there's no real lock-on system, and I was correct in that, because yes, you can lock onto a target if you stare at them and aim at them and press the lock button, but once you run in a different direction trying to get some distance, Laura will disengage her lock on and you have to then turn around again, aim at the enemies, and this could be a problem with certain enemies like the dogs in the fourth game, or even bats or rats that are trying to attack you. Whereas if you look at the targeting system from Tomb Raider, Anniversary, Legend, and Underworld, that had a better targeting system in my opinion, because you had an actual lock-on target and you wouldn't disengage your target when you're trying to gain distance from your enemies. This is something that again could have been fixed and added if they did a ground up, re-release, remake, remaster. That would have made the combat much more better in my opinion. I also felt in the fourth game, at least, the enemies felt more like bullet sponges, taking way too many shots than they needed to. Maybe this is how it was in the original game back in the day, but not something that should be here in the current modern remastered here. And I also did have some minor issues when it came to audio, in the sense that sometimes the game would lose its normal audio level and it'll drop a lot lower than intended. And I have a hard time hearing what's going on because the game just didn't have the audio normal throughout the entire experience so far. There was just certain times where the audio would drop quite a bit without me having any changes to my settings or my volume. So that was another issue that happened, but not as often as the other issues with the game. So when it comes to these games individually and whether or not I enjoyed my time with them so far, because I still haven't beaten the games yet, but I did put a significant amount of more time into each one given what I now know. And I will say that Part 5, which I believe is Revelations, is the one that I felt the most enjoyment out of in this collection, being that the levels seemed a bit more interesting and there's actually more bosses in my current time that I played that I had to go through, and the controls were just a little bit more responsive in a way when it came to like swimming and a little bit of the gunplay, but there was still the unresponsive parts of the controls like the jumping and trying to go through certain climbing sections and that kind of thing. But from a story perspective, I felt, with the exception of the cutscenes, because the cutscenes were comically bad, both in terms of dialogue and the animations, the idea of Part 5, the story of Part 5, was more interesting than the story of Part 4. Now, Part 4 did have more of the cinematic cutscenes, or whatever you want to call them, back in the day. Again, very silly, very funny looking, but I feel like the story and dialogue in 4 wasn't as cheesy and wasn't as cringy as the dialogue from the cutscenes in Part 5. But these are some things that maybe dialogue-wise wouldn't be fixed with a ground-up re-release, but at least the visuals would have been much more improved for the story mode, or for the story of the games, if they did a ground up re-release. Now, Part 4 also had, in my opinion, environments that were a bit more boring compared to Part 5. The whole ancient Egypt theme is cool to a point, but you tend to get tired of it the more you go through it and the more you just play. More sand everywhere, more ancient ruins, more of the same enemies that you will fight here and there. It's just got boring for me. At least the Revelations had different areas you can explore, different places you get to see. Angel of Darkness, I just did not like what I did in that game so far. I've actually remember playing it on the PS2 and didn't like it too much back then. And again, I don't like it that much here, especially with Angel of Darkness having really funny dialogue options that you can choose, which sometimes don't even make sense. Laura's sentence wouldn't make too much sense in terms of grammar and proper speaking, I guess. Having different weapons that would require various ammo and not using her classic two dual handguns that have infinite ammo. They took that away. There was some funkiness with the controls, such as trying to crouch and go into a prone position. The minor RPG aspects of Angel of Darkness, trying to find different items like money for information from certain characters, or trying to navigate a certain level with some clues that you're given by NPCs, but no real, method of knowing where to go, no real structure or hand-holding. I don't want to say hand-holding because that makes it sound like it's too easy if you hand-holding, but there's no indication really of where you're supposed to go in that game. You kind of just figure it out as you go. And Angel of Darkness has a really stupid function, which is her strength stamina meter. And I understand it was a function in the original PS2 game where doing certain actions will make Laura feel stronger and make her have the ability to climb walls and ledges for longer periods of time, the more that you increase your strength meter. But to have it here again on the remastered was really stupid for a modern game, modern gaming times, and I just thought that could have been removed from a ground up re-release, and I just thought that the whole stamina system is stupid. Laura gets tired from climbing in a Tomb Raider game. Makes zero sense whatsoever. Now, again, I understand people from the OG version of the games who played it back in the day, they want to have that classic experience again. They want to preserve the classics, and that's fine. As I said before, you can have the classic visuals and make brand new ground up visuals much better than what we see here visually, and you can still have the fun and excitement for those returning players from back in the day, as well as the new players who want to experience these games for the first time. Again, I only played Angel of Darkness back in the day, did not play the other games, so I'll be considered a new player to these earlier games of Tomb Raider. I actually have more knowledge and experience and time with Anniversary, Legend, and Underworld, and then the reboot trilogy. So I do think that they could have done a bit better with the visuals and with the controls. Again, you still have the tank controls if you want to play with that, but I shouldn't be forced to be told to use tank controls when there's a modern control scheme there for a reason. And I had a comment that I saw calling me like a Gen Z gamer, someone who's Gen Z who never played the games and don't know what I'm talking about. I was born in the early 90s. I'm in my 30s. I'm not Gen Z. I'm a millennial. So get that shit right, because I don't want to be classified as a Gen Z. I'm not Gen Z. I'm a millennial. I was born in the early 90s. So check yourself. So when it comes to this review and this package here, for the price that you're paying, you are going to get 3 classic Tomb Raider games. Even though one of them is a big stinker, Angel of Darkness, you do get 2 other Tomb Raider games. And there are people who actually like Part 4, Tomb Raider 4, than the other games. They actually like The Last Revelation as a whole. And there are those who like Tomb Raider Chronicles. I actually like Chronicles a bit more when I played it here compared to Last Revelation. But if you are someone who liked those games back in the day, you do have this package now. And you probably already bought it and played it and saw my review and said what you had to say in that one. But hopefully this review here will give you a bit of a different perspective of my review of the game. Because again, I had a bit more fun this time around giving it another chance, and I'm going to put more time into it to beat these games and get the most out of it, but maybe not Angel of Darkness. Again, that game is not that great, but I did have a bit more fun with what I did, knowing what I know now, and I'm sure you will have a lot of fun if you're a classic Tomb Raider player who knows these games in and out and is just jumping back into it. But if you're a newcomer who never played these games before, you may not be as interested and as excited given the poor visuals, in my opinion, the unresponsive controls, at least on the Switch, they're unresponsive, and the stories that you might see here, they may not be what you're used to. But for a low price tag, not a bad game to try. And that's all I can really say about this game and this collection. So that's my re-review, my first ever re-review of a game that I've done on this channel. But if this review helped you get a bit more perspective on me and what's been going on, hit that like button. I'll appreciate it. Or dislike, you could dislike it too. Leave a comment down below, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.